All right, well, we're going to go get ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for Nobility's Toolkit Tuesdays. I'm really thrilled about today. This is a really exciting topic for me. Today, we are going to talk about the parent perspective. So we have a couple of interviews coming up that I think will really help bring some new ideas and some new thoughts to us in terms of how we interact with our parents and how to help assist them in being collaborators in our students' success. So to get started, I'm going to have Molly go ahead and put our slides in the chat. And you can reach those at bit.ly/toolkit2s parent, and that'll be a capital T, and then a capital P. And Molly will put that back in the chat for us. So that way, if you want to follow along or have access to these afterwards, please feel free. All right, we're going to move right along and just introduce Nobility briefly. Nobility is a nonprofit. We're based out of Austin, but we have people working everywhere. I'm talking to you now from currently sunny Birmingham, Alabama. It was pretty rainy and nasty earlier, but so we are all over the world, all over the nation, and with the mission of making a more inclusive digital world for people with disabilities. And one of our ways that we do that is through, of course, our community programs. We have several different events and ways that we interact with the community. Our Accessibility Internet Rally, which is our competition on web design. Access U, which is our big web accessibility tech conference coming up in May. Our Be a Digital Ally, this has been a monthly webinar series that has just been really well attended, great interaction where we talk with people that are content creators of all sizes and experiences in how to create more accessible digital content. And then, of course, our group here today is under the K-12 digital accessibility. So again, looking at how to make the K-12 space more accessible for our students. And one way we do that is through our Toolkit Tuesdays. And then, of course, our upcoming K-12 Access Summit. So that will be an online conference looking at digital inclusion through accessible design. So we'll have a little bit more information on that later. So today we have two featured guests, and I'm really excited. Like I said, this is a topic I've been looking forward to discussing. Our first will actually be a pre-recorded video. This is a former colleague of mine, Paola Vazquez. She is based in El Paso, Texas. She is, of course, a mother of two. She said first and foremost in her interview, that is my primary identification, right? I am a mother. She is currently a professional development consultant for the Regional Service Center out in El Paso, Texas. I think she brings a really fascinating perspective to the conversation. So I was happy to be able to interview her before she was off on another professional development job. So we'll watch that video in a minute. And then, of course, we have the lovely Forrest. She's also a PhD and a mom of one. She is a brain injury advocate and consultant based out of Austin, Texas. And I met Anne through Sharon Rush, who is our executive director. And as soon as Sharon was introducing me to her, I was like, oh, I really need to meet her. And after we had a chance to talk, I was like, yes, I need to have her perspective in this conversation as well. So I'm really excited today. So I'm going to try and step out of the way and let these moms do all the talking for me. So for our agenda today, we will have our two parent interviews. First, we'll hear from Paola that we pre-recorded. And then, of course, we have Anne with us. And then at the end, hopefully we'll have some time. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Molly is with us as well today, and she'll be able to keep a track of those and make sure we get everything covered before the end of our session today. So thank you all, and we're excited to have you here. So today we have one of our parents with us here today, and I'm really just going to step aside and let you introduce yourself. So if you could please give us your name and then really just any kind of information you want to share with our audience today.
Okay. Hello, my name is Dr. Paola Vazquez, and I am a mother, an educator, and a community outreach volunteer. I was a special ed teacher for 10 years and an administrator in a school district. And now I'm currently professional development consultant in the region of El Paso. And like I said, my first role is being a mom. And so after having kids, that really helped me kind of look a little bit deeper into the educational system and the different processes that, our kids go through firsthand. So thank you for having me here.
Great. Well, thank you. And if you could just really kind of describe your family composition and maybe some of the available support networks for you, because really every family is different. So I want to make sure that we kind of understand, what your family is.
Okay. So my family, I'm a single parent. I have two daughters. My youngest daughter is 7 years old, and her name is Olivia. She's currently attending public school setting. And then I have an 11-year-old, and she's in 6th grade. And, I, when I first had Isabella, it was difficult. I was living in San Antonio, and all my family was in El Paso. And so navigating through that, you talk about support systems. And as a parent, you kind of have to figure out, like, how am I going to navigate if you're a single parent, not just a single parent, but even when kids have both parents. So I decided to move back to El Paso because this is where the foundation of my support system was. My family, I have both of my parents. They're both retired. My brothers also, 3 of them live here in El Paso. And so, as a single parent, it was a difficult choice because I really do like San Antonio. I wish I could have stayed, but for me, family comes first, and being able to have those available support networks, I had to move back to El Paso. I was there in San Antonio for 13 years, and now I've been in El Paso 12 years. So,
well, I want to dive into just maybe some what you do find to be effective in communication with the schools that your daughters attend.
For me, because I live with this device here.
It is, that phone is glued to your hand. Yes.
Yes, because of work. I find that, the apps on the phone, the Class Dojo, there's a group me and then the other ones remind me. To me as a parent, because of the nature of my job and just me, the phone. But I know the elementary, Sageline is really good about sending out flyers, whether it be electronically, whether it be paper-based phone calls. They're still sending out phone calls. I know when we had the whole, what was it, 30 minutes of snowstorm, and then it.
Oh yeah.
They were really good about letting the community know there's going to be a late start and this is happening. So when it comes to that, I do appreciate that's working for me. I've talked to other parents. I think a barrier is a lot of the other parents are not as, their strength is not technology. Mm. So that seems to be a barrier. But I mean, if they're going to use multimodal ways of communicating that, whether it be a flyer or paper, it just depends on what works for you. But I know I've talked to some parents, and they don't know how to open up a file or get in an email or some of the apps. The kids are the ones showing them.
So. Oh yeah. Well, and then that way they can just show them what they want to show them too.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you don't need to read that message. It's fine.
Something here, and then no, you just skim over that, Mom. You don't need to look at that.
It's just a notice. It's just the thing that pops up all the time. It's fine.
Right.
And then I wanted to know too, because we talked about apps, we talked about flyers, but I think a place that some of us go to, but we don't think about enough of, maybe in the way that it's designed or how it's created, is your school's website or your district's website. And I'm just curious if you have any specific examples of how effective or ineffective using those platforms are in terms of the websites.
Well, I recently had an experience actually, and it wasn't very good. So Olivia came home, and I had purchased the yearbook, and so I went to go pay for it. And then last week she comes and she's like, the technology teacher, because I guess she's the one in charge of creating the yearbook, said that I'm not going to be in the yearbook. And I was like, why are you not going to be in the yearbook? What happened? Did you miss the picture? Like, that's my fear. She was probably somewhere else and she didn't get online to get the picture taken. She goes, no, I don't know. And I said, can you have her write me a note? And that way I can get her email address tonight or a phone number. She says she can't write a note if you can just call the school. And I was like, well, that's kind of weird, because a note would have been just real fast. I could have just emailed, called.
Yeah.
So then running around with my job and traveling, all that, I didn't have time. So one of the times that I was downtime, I get on the internet and I'm like, let me see if I could just find her email address. And then I had to find somebody else's, but her email address was there. And so looking at the website itself for the district, I had to look up other information. And I'm sitting there and it took me, Jessica, about 10 minutes to find the other information I was looking at. Not very user friendly. It was like I was going through a rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at that, I'm thinking I'm pretty technologically savvy, according to me, right? And
yeah,
trying to get in there. And it took me 10 minutes. Can you imagine somebody that doesn't feel confident getting, first of all, on the computer and now trying to navigate through there?
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely something that, feedback, make it more user friendly. No, it shouldn't take somebody 10 minutes to look what they're looking for.
Yeah. You should be able to find it fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And to be fair, districts do have a lot of information because they have several schools and things like that, but you would think you'd be able to drill down to at least get to where you needed to go first. And then I wanted to talk about, because we have been talking, really just more specifically about digital interactions, but I'm curious if you have had an opportunity to visit, either your daughter's schools or, district offices, if you've had any experiences or barriers that you've encountered when going to visit those.
Definitely elementaries. I mean, if it weren't for the fact that I work there, they're not letting people in. I'm just like, well, I work here, so I have to show my bat when I used to work there. My mom also helps me, and sometimes she goes to the campus and she's like, I can't get in, they won't let me in, I have to have an appointment, so it's not very friendly. It's still, I think they still have the COVID mentality that we're not letting people in. And I think that right now at this point is really hurting a lot of people that don't have the technology access or don't know how to do it, because now you're breaking down the only mode of communication that they might have where they feel more comfortable going face to face. And now the campus is saying, no, call the teacher, make an appointment, or email. The nature of the campus for Young Women's Academy, because it's all girls school, I think they're a little bit more apt to not letting people in because of where it's at too and the nature of it. But other campuses, I haven't heard of anybody having problems getting on. I think it's mostly elementaries.
Yeah. And do you feel like it's more of just they're not communicating in advance or providing easier ways for people? Because there are safety concern issues, of course, why they don't want just anybody to be able to wander on. But at the same time, how are they communicating that with people that, hey, we really appreciate if you were to make an appointment first.
Yeah.
What happens if you can't make that appointment,
And I have seen it on the newsletter, there will not be any access unless you have an appointment. But once again, because if you really look at it, a lot of our communities, grandparents are raising our kids. I'm gonna tell you, my mom doesn't read the newsletter. I have to convey the
Does
information.
she get the newsletter? Because it's probably just going to you, right?
Yeah.
Because when you sign up for those, they're sending it to the parent. They're not sending it to the auxiliary support people, right? They're not saying, hey, should we add your grandparents to these?
No, but that's a good one. I think I might need to do that. But even then, Olivia would have to open the phone and show it to her.
And then show it to
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's something people don't think about though too, is, they create these things, like these parent portals or these places where parents can go and see the grades or get notifications. But are they taking that extra step to say, okay, well, we've got like the primary contact, but like like for you specifically, your parents are helping out. So it's, your daughter's grandparents are coming in also, but are they receiving that notification that like, oh, hey, you've got to set up an appointment first, because they're not necessarily included in those communications, that then becomes the burden on you to then communicate that to them.
Definitely.
Do you feel anything in the environment or in the culture is designed to make you feel welcomed and included when you are on the campus as a parent?
When it is open, I do feel welcomed, the teachers. And I think that also affects the teachers, because I think the struggle too, not being able to have that face-to-face contact sometimes, affects them as far as how they get feedback from us. Because if they're not able to communicate through virtual or platforms or things like that, then that communication's lost and they're not able to have that collaborative relationship with the parents. But the times that they have had events, I do feel welcomed. And I really see the emphasis on the social emotional learning. I think that is something that has come about, that has increased, and they've kept, because they know a lot. Like my daughter, she missed out on kindergarten. She wasn't in a traditional classroom. So a lot of those skills and a lot of those experiences she didn't get to be exposed to. And I think the teachers too have come to realize, we need to add a little bit more SEL daily. And I think that has helped also foster that environment in the culture.
And so, talking a little bit, we mentioned COVID a couple times. And I wanted to know if, we kind of got to think back, and it feels like forever ago, but like what I like to call the before times, right? Like, so before COVID, were there any resources or supports that maybe you received from your schools that, because of COVID, now you don't have access to, or maybe it stopped and it hasn't restarted, or maybe it came back, but something that you noticed was lacking when COVID hit?
I guess I can speak more to when COVID hit, and then now we're kind of somewhat normal states, and now we don't have
Sure.
it. Like a lot of apps. I know during COVID, kids were having access to apps, software, different educational programs. And once we went back to the traditional, they were like, we're gonna not have these. Now you have to pay for them. Mm-hmm. And I think that, if you had the students working on it and they get used to it and then you just take it away. The remote learning, I think as a parent, I feel, that should be an option that school districts offer. But I know, it's a lot of work, a lot of money, but a lot of kids flourished. They did better when it was remote. So now we come back and we're going to say, no, we're going to take it away. And I don't know, I feel that that's something that the districts miss the mark on. Because if it's working, I'm not saying go full remote, but maybe try to look at ways how you can still integrate some of those aspects in there.
Yeah.
In the traditional learning.
Yeah, because I know for some campuses, once campuses started opening up again and they could put kids in classrooms, they wanted to yank as many of those devices out of their hands, or they just wanted to say, well, you're here now, so you're just going to stay here. And it's just
a device. And I'm like,
and then, no, I totally understand that. And then with the apps and software, I just kind of want to swing back to that one. So is it that the campuses were either getting access to it for free, and then now the campuses just don't have the funds to pay for it? It's okay. And so then lastly, I just really kind of want to get your feeling on what is something that you feel schools or districts just maybe kind of miss the mark on when they're communicating with parents.
I think sometimes they miss a mark on looking at the cultural relevance of the community when they're disseminating the information. I know, they send out flyers in Spanish and English, but I think sometimes they need to go a little bit deeper when they're looking at, okay, if this flyer is going to go out, what's the purpose, and target the audience. Like you said, if it's grandparents that are mostly taking care of the kids, then how can I make it more user friendly for a grandparent to use it versus somebody that uses technology every minute of the day? Also looking at events in the community that is going to directly impact the community that they're working with, as far as like knowing about the culture of the students. And I know predominantly we have Hispanic students, but maybe going out and asking the parents, what would you like to see? I have yet to actually see a survey for a campus asking me what type of trainings, what type of events as a parent I'd like to see.
Yeah, so
Getting the
really
feedback.
Yeah, and really asking the parents, what can the school do for you to help, make you more of a collaborative partner? Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a great one. I don't think we ask our parents enough of, like, what kind of training would you like from us? What would you like us to do?
And I know the district where the girls are at, they're very high on customer service, but it doesn't go into depth as far as resources that are directly for the parents or trainings or support. It's more along like, were you greeted and did they smile at you when you came in the building?
Yeah.
So those kind of things. So it's very, very different.
Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you would like to add or let us know? The world is listening.
As a parent, you just have to be the advocate. You're the first advocate for your kids, and then also talking to them to be advocates for themselves. I know Isabella's personality is more of an introvert. Olivia, I don't have a problem. She advocates for herself very well. Sometimes a little too much. Just showing her the proper ways to do it. But I think that's the biggest step, is being the advocate and then teaching our kids how to be advocates for themselves. Because if we don't speak up, a lot of the school systems, districts have these master plans and they meet and they're like, oh, we think this is the best thing in the world for our kids. But then they roll it out and try to implement it. And if it doesn't work and then we don't speak up, then we're missing that collaborative piece. And I think that's really important. We can gripe and complain all we want, but if we don't speak up to build that relationship to work together for the student success, then we're missing that piece.
Well, thank you so much. This was great. Say hello to your lovely girls for me.
I will let them know.
All right. So that was Miss Paola Vazquez. And some of the things that I really liked from our conversation, she really does talk about relationship, and that was brought up several times. And I think that's something we forget. I know when I worked in a school district, and we're creating our, communications, our emails, or we're trying to design different programs. I think it was trying to remember that it really is about building those relationships, because without those relationships, then how can you move forward? I also want to recognize that she did talk about culture and recognition. I think one of the big things is that idea of recognition of the additional family support network, right? So like I mentioned in the video, we talk about parent portals and parent notifications, but if the grandparent's the one that needs to pick up the student, or the grandparent's the one that needs to stop in the front office, how are they getting those notifications? How are they receiving that information? And so, and if you notice also, when we're talking about this, we're not just looking at it from digital only, because I think if you just look at it from that scope, you really kind of miss out on all the other aspects of how you can interact with your parents. And really, when you design your environments, your activities, your events, your communications from that perspective of accessibility, and also recognizing culture, and with the intent to build relationships, it will span across all of those different systems and environments. So I really, I wanted to bring that up, because, if you're sitting in a mobility session, you're kind of like, well, why are we talking about what a front office looks like? Well, because that's also going to impact how everything else looks. You know, your culture is your culture is your culture, whether it's on your website or in your front office or in your classroom. You're going to see those things permeate everywhere. So but now I'm going to step over to the side, so to speak, and have our other special guest here today. So Anne, we're going to kind of run through very similar questions with you. So you can just nod your head yes and say, yes, I agree with everything, and we'll wrap it up real quick. But instead, I'd actually like to have some more specific answers from you. So I would just like to go ahead and get started and ask, how would you like to be introduced, and just include any information that you feel the audience needs to know about you.
Well, I'm a mom first and foremost also, and I also have a PhD in economics, and I I was working in Washington and had a bad car accident where my head went from side to side. So I'm actually on my second career, which is being a cognitive advocate. I had cognitive disabilities as a result of a traumatic brain injury, and they didn't go away 2 weeks afterwards. Which means I've been living for 22 years as a advocate for cognitive. My son goes to I'm at the local elementary school, and he's now at middle school, but I really enjoyed listening to a lot about the elementary school. And when it was Paola was talking about COVID, I think that's kind of where I want to stay, is the elementary school.
All right. And can you kind of give us a description of your family composition and maybe some of your available support networks?
Sure. So my husband co-parents with me, and my son is in 7th grade right now, and so it's just the three of us and a wonderful dog who's Betsy, who we acquired during COVID. My brain injury support strategies always tell me to develop my support network ahead of time. So in kindergarten, I was the one with some other parents advocating ahead of time that we all learn each other's names and have share our phone numbers. And I had a very tight neighborhood community where if I couldn't do something, somebody'd lean in. And I have to say that is from the print directory that they did in 3rd grade, and we haven't had a print directory since. So that's how I found the information and had my support networks through that. So I'm, as opposed to our previous guest, who's was high tech before my injury, am high tech, or striving to be high tech again, but it was paper that was really helpful, has been really helpful to me with cognitive issues.
Excellent. All right. And it sounds like you had a slightly different support network, where like Paola's was very family based. Yours was, family, yes, but then also, the people in your neighborhood, the other parents that your, students were interacting with. Excellent. And just to confirm, you have you said your son's in 7th grade, and he at public school, private, charter?
He's at Keeling middle school, and graduated from the 6th grade leadership academy at our local school, Lee School.
Oh, okay. And is he on campus, or is he receiving instruction primarily at home?
He did much better on campus. He's a kid that really thrived at Lee, and really enjoyed being with his friends and the social environment, riding his bike to school, seeing his friends learned how to ride the bus home, where other kids that went 4 stops, whatever. But so, and he's very social kid, and school just opened up, elementary school opened up for him all kinds of social aspects that he just was like loved, absolutely loved. And if I'm going to move this forward, that meant that when COVID came along, being home was like prison. And he had a lot of difficulties with, he didn't want to show, he's shy. I mean, you'd think that an outgoing guy isn't shy also, but he is, and we knew that at school. Just the first going online, I mean, he didn't want to show his face. Right. And since it was fifth grade, his teachers at least knew a lot about, COVID first happened about 2 years ago in March, right? And his teachers that year knew him well, knew his strengths, knew who he was, knew how he compensated. At that point, he had he needed to be sitting in the front of the class. He'd had a concussion, or he'd actually had 2 concussions at school, and we had some accommodations. He needed to be sitting in front of the class. He needed to be wearing reading glasses. He had 4 or 5 accommodations, but his teachers knew who he was, right? And how he did everything. And so a huge change during COVID, because the teachers are all, and they did an amazing job, right? Struggling to come up to speed, but he wouldn't show his face, right? And I just can't imagine what that was. It was one thing for the teacher that knew him in 5th grade, right? But as 6th grade happened, these teachers had seen him all his life as a kindergarten. They knew who he was, but they didn't know his how to teach to him. And we spent a lot of the year getting medical resources for him. In addition to the concussion, we began to realize that there were some congenital issues going on from his birth. And one of the pediatrician said, it's as if you wiped out all his compensatory strategies by going online with new teachers. And that really struck me, that he was a child that would look to other people in the room to sort of get these environmental cues. And we'd taken away all his environmental cues. The other thing that I want to say about COVID is, because I have a cognitive disability, I had been using his school time as rest time, right? Or relaxation time, or recharging. And some of my recharging was volunteer work. It was beginning to be more and more paid work. And I actually, when I think about it, Nobility just asked me to do a keynote speech on cognitive. And so I was working on sort of how do we distill cognitive. So when COVID came along, I needed to drop out of the workforce, like many women had to do in order to take care of their children and their families. I stepped out of my role at Nobility of doing a keynote. I reduced a lot of my volunteer activities at the Brain Injury Association of America, and I focused full time on trying to be an advocate for my child. In addition, my doctor had said, because of your cognitive issues, I was already doing grayscale, which is black and white and reduces the cognitive energy. But she said, you've got to, there's so many messages online, you've got to get off all of this. And so I moved to I was using the paper. We moved to just really different strategies around my own cognition. And while that's been successful overall, it was really difficult. And difficult to teach my son when I couldn't understand what the stream of information was coming from the school. And like I said, his compensatory strategies had been wiped out. I reached out to one of my friends who is a teacher at Montessori, and she said, put up a paper calendar, and so that your son can at least keep up with what he's supposed to be doing at different times. And I just didn't have enough structure to even be able to formulate what that. I wrote a paper calendar, but it didn't help my son as much as I did. So it was a pretty difficult time for me as a mom with a cognitive disability, and just feeling as if my son wasn't getting what he needed and for learning, and that my own disability was part of the problem that was standing in the way. So it was really, really difficult.
Well, and I think you bring up some interesting things in terms of, things that we didn't recognize that, all of us use wherever we are. You talked about those environmental cues. And I think there's something also too that we don't recognize just overall for anybody, regardless if they have disability or not, is just cognitive load. I think in general, just for parents, when COVID hit, like that was a brand new set of things that they had to do. And so I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I know it's more about, specifically your needs, but I think that's something that by you bringing that up, it helps other people recognize that, like, wait, I have cognitive, like there's only so much this brain can hold on to, regardless of if I have a disability or not. You're right. There's just only so much we can take. And I think hearing about, having, you had to figure out how can I go paper-based, or how can I minimize the amount of online information I'm getting. But I think that's a good reminder for schools that, just because you provide it online does not mean it is accessible for everyone, right? Like, even though, you do all of the guidelines, you make it nice and easy to read and simplify it as much as possible. But some days you're just not going to be able to look at that screen. So, how else can they get that information? And when your friend was recommending the calendar, like that's something that, looking back, I could easily see myself going like, oh man, we should have thought about making just a template for parents. Like, hey, here's a calendar, print it out, make some, fill it in how you need to. So that way, again, just to reduce your cognitive load as the parent, trying to think of like, how do I create a schedule? How do I, organize all of this now that this is the situation we're in? So I think it's thinking about those multimodal supports, and not just having, and I mean, online's good if it's always there, and hopefully you can find somebody else to help you get to it if you need to. But I think just remembering that that's not always the best way for people to get access to information. I think that's a really important reminder.
But I think for the long term, we do have, we do have an opportunity to realize some people learn better on paper, and some people and mixed, and just sort of the strengths and the weaknesses of our different tools.
Exactly. And so I want to ask you, maybe if either currently or maybe, maybe in the last year or so, can you think of a specific example of effective communication with your school or district?
Yeah, here's what I want to say. So I'm still working around Blend, at first. And Blend, for those of you who don't know, are the tool that that Austin AISD is using for our students. And one of the really ineffective communications I had was I had tried to look at videos to help me understand how to use this. And here my son is in 7th grade, and I'm saying, okay, still can't use Blend very effectively, right? And I reached out to the accessibility coordinator at AISD. And I said, look, I need to know how to get on consistently, right? I need to be able to find this. My high-tech husband was having to lean in a lot, let's say. I need to figure out how to do this consistently. I need to be able to understand where his classes are. And I need to understand, just basics. And she was a woman, and she was so, okay, we're going to make this as easy as possible, which is exactly what I needed. And so she got me online consistently, and then she showed me where to find the different classes. The way it's organized, you had to look for different classes, And then what she showed me was that Frontline, which was the reporting information, the grading and things like that, was actually not where in a different place or where you'd expect it to be. It's a different platform than Blend, and that you found it under the teachers, under the teachers' name, or in a place you wouldn't expect to find it. And I was so thrilled, and I told my husband about it, and he said, now that is 3 clicks past intuitive. He had never found it, and that was his 3 clicks past intuitive. And then on my dog walk, I informed every other mom in the neighborhood, so not only were they teaching me, right, or was this wonderful person teaching me, but I was able to pass it on to other moms and sometimes dads also in the neighborhood who I just, hey, do you know where Frontline is? What's Frontline? So that was to me a very effective communication. I still don't know things like we're in the 4th period, and I'm still having to ask a teacher, well, what does this piece of paper with something written on it mean? Does that mean he's completed the assignment? Does it mean it's not completed? My son was quite sick during the 3rd semester, and so, or the 3rd 9-week term, so we were trying to make up a lot of work, and he doesn't know, and I don't know. And so there's my example of effective. If you have time to reach out to the accessibility coordinator, I had a really good experience and really grateful for it. And a lot of the communication, I would say, the school is so busy right now that it's just, they're cheerful. They've got a great attitude. It's my heart goes out to them, my hand, but for me, that supplemented by the assistive technology person was tremendous.
And I really like what your husband said there, like the 3 clicks beyond intuitive. And I think that's something, again, a lot of us don't think about when we're designing things, or when we're designing supports for our parents, or when we're designing our websites. Like, how intuitive is this? If I'm a parent and I need to seek out this information, would I think to look underneath the teacher's name on this particular platform? Or would I think that I need to leave this platform and go to a different platform to find this information? So I think that's a really important thing, is we don't think about intuitiveness or making sure that it's intuitive when we're designing something. So no, that was great. Thanks for mentioning that. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to kind of smush some questions here together. I didn't know if you had another experience with the district's website, or any other specific barriers that you wanted to mention on that front.
AISD just put out a something asking us for information about how we interact with the school, which was really interesting.
That was really cool, yeah.
And one of I have figured out how to find on the website. I figured out how to find my teacher's information, right? But that's as far as I've gotten, right? That's as much as I use it. And what I found fascinating in Austin's survey, and we'll report it back to the school, is that while they asked demographics, nobody asked, do I have a cognitive disability? And I just thought that, on the one hand, they're looking across schools information over there, right? But I would be interested in knowing what is access like from different demographics. And I would be interested in knowing, how are people with disabilities, how are parents with disabilities working? I have some contact with that because I reached out to other parents with disabilities, but it seems to me that that's an important issue.
No, I think that's definitely important. I think as more schools are becoming more conscientious of, cultural recognition and cultural teaching, and just like other companies looking at, diversity and equity, inclusion, like a lot of other companies, they're forgetting to include disability in that sphere when they're looking at their DEI or looking at their demographics. Like, are we finding out who our users are, who our parents are? Do they have specific accessibility needs? Are they struggling with certain areas, or are they considered to have different types of disabilities? So yeah, no, I think that's great that they were to bring you in, but at the same time, they forgot a really important question.
Well, and for me, I have to print everything out so that I can see it on paper, right? My dear husband has to print things out for me. And, I'm lucky that he spends the time. I'm lucky that he's willing to, and sometimes he doesn't have the time, right? So I do think that that's important. And I know the blind community, for them, they've been practicing online. One of the things that they talk about is that they've been practicing a lot online. So different communities are impacted differently. I'm not sure whether everybody's going to want to say that they have a disability, right? And so there's that.
I think there's ways to phrase some questions that at least might give you some, because even if I don't have a disability, but if I prefer paper communication to digital, that doesn't necessarily need to label me as anything specific, but it can at least make them aware of specific needs or preferences that I have. So, but I think that's something to include there as well.
And one of the things that I didn't mention was that Toolkit Tuesday has helped me so much. And it was a Toolkit Tuesday that helped me understand that I wasn't able to interact with the material, and and it was like, oh my gosh, I've got the word. Like, I just felt helpless. And a previous Toolkit Tuesday had taught me how different students at different levels were accessing the material at a greater way. So really grateful to Knowbility in all this, and this particular program and all this, which is why I wanted to give back.
And we're very appreciative of it. Thank you. Well, just for our last question, which I think is kind of an important one, is just what is something that you feel schools or districts are missing the mark on when communicating with parents?
My son originally has a 504 plan right now, which is, he has to self-advocate for what he needs. And what I found, and his school believes, and I believe, and his doctors believe, that he needs an IEP, the educational plan, so that he can be assisted at school and get more supports. And I feel really lucky that Keeling started rolling the ball, that started the ball rolling, that we needed the full blown. But what I feel like, I found that there wasn't plain language about what a 504 plan was. I never even knew what it was. I mean, I'd always heard IEP, what was available under a 504, and what the structure was. And I know that one of the things I found out was that you could do an assistive technology review under a 504 plan. I'm not great at researching the internet, but it looked as if you could only do that under a IEP plan. And similarly, as we've moved from a 504 to an IEP at middle school, one's started and one's in effect right now, right? That I feel like there hasn't been good plain language around, well, it's the school's responsibility, not just my son and I as advocates, but what does that mean, and how do I as a parent interact with the school on that so that I can be part of it? I know that with COVID, parents became much more in the classroom. So I know much more about what is being done and what isn't being done by what's going on, and some more clarity around the the supports and the appropriate supports, and how to develop as a parent, how to think about appropriate supports. But it would be more helpful to me to go in there with more understanding of what my role is and how I can, because I'm seeing things at home or seeing things while he's working that may be important, and that I want to know when to communicate that, when not to, and right now, especially because staff is so overwhelmed.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up and go to questions, I just want to kind of summarize a lot of what you and Paola both talked about. And these are kind of the things I hope most of us are taking with us is don't abandon everything. Let's really just try to make sure it's what works best for students when we're looking at their tools and resources. I think too, a big thing that we heard from both of our parents today is really just being user friendly, right? Being mindful of parents' cognitive load. We've got a lot of stuff going on in addition to also helping navigate our students' academic success. I think also planning and designing for those additional family members or auxiliary support network, right? Like if it's not going to be the parent picking up the student, how might the grandparent interact differently? What supports do we need to put in place or plan for that? I think seeking out feedback from parents, and I was really excited to hear that AISD has already started doing that in terms of what parents are looking for when they're going to those websites. But I think also looking at, training, supports, resources, what do parents need? And I think that way you're not having to make those individual phone calls like you did, Anne. Maybe they can preemptively have some of those supports ready to go. And navigation definitely needs to be intuitive when we're looking on those websites, or even just navigating through the different software for our students. I think, and I put initially when I was writing these down, we always say know your audience or learn about your audience. But when talking about schools and parents, we want to remember that they're collaborators, right? So that's why I specifically said, learn about your collaborators and what their needs are. And then that way, that facilitates that communication and that cooperation. And then, and I think you did bring up a good point. I think a lot of parents just kind of, because they either don't have time or are unable to kind of untangle that web of student supports, and especially if you're going deeper into 504 and IEP, I think it can be hard for parents to fully understand what their options are. And also, like you said, what is my role? What should I be doing? What can I do? But then also, this shouldn't all be my job. There are other players here too. So I think just plain language when discussing those is a good reminder too. And then I think just lastly, designing everything with accessibility as the goal, right? So not just as the afterthought, but really that idea of accessibility. Can people access this? Can they navigate, engage, communicate to the full authentic self when they are on our websites, communicating with us in our environments, working with different softwares and programs. So I think it's just that idea of accessibility as the goal. And so before we leave, I just want to mention this other great resource that we have here. And Anne, you gave this to me to share out with our parents and with our schools that are joining us. Do you want to talk a little bit about what this document is?
Sure. It is Brain Steps. It's from a program called Brain Steps. That's the part of the Brain Injury Association of Pennsylvania. And I reached out. I was so frustrated with what should I be looking for with my son when he's on the computer, and what are the things I should be compensating about, and reached out to, I had the honor to visit CDC around traumatic brain injury, my son's and mine, and I reached out to CDC to ask them, was there any guidance on how to teach with schools and teach kids in schools? I was just beyond my Wits End, and they sent this to me, and I found it really helpful to think about visual scanning, visual attention, visual memory, and cognitive fatigue, and how it's a multifactorial process, and I understand a lot of it from internally, but how do you think about people that how to think about my son in a way that was a little bit more guided, I guess. And I found it really useful to be thinking about it, and I wanted to share it with everyone.
So we will have this available. You'll be able to click the link through the slides. So I want to thank you, Anne, so much. This has been absolutely great and thrilling. And I cannot thank you enough for being here. We're just going to quickly wrap up and remind everybody that we do have our K-12 Access Summit coming up. This will be the end of July, so it'll be July 26th through the 28th in July. So we'll hope to see you there. And with that, I just want to say thank you again, Anne, for joining us. This has been just absolutely great talking to you. And thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time.